Welcome, everybody, to the Wonder Boldly podcast. I'm Christine Santos, bringing to you all of the action steps and knowledge I've learned on my journey to becoming an online business owner, quit my corporate job, and now live the life that I desire on my own terms. This podcast is jam-packed with all the knowledge I've gained over the past few years growing my online business. I am so passionate about you going after what it is that you want. I want to encourage and motivate you to know that you too can live the life that you desire. Thank you so much for listening. Let's go. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Wonder Boldly. Today on Wonder Boldly, I am so honored to welcome Rebecca Dwight Bruff, an award-winning author, storyteller, and advocate for the power of words to inspire curiosity, empathy, and a more whole future. She was born in Texas, and Rebecca's love for language started early, though she initially took a different path, earning degrees in theology and serving as an ordained United Methodist minister from Texas. Her work took her around the world, leading cross-cultural partnerships and humanitarian efforts in places like Mexico, Guatemala, Nigeria, and France. After years of writing sermons and eulogies, Rebecca's journey took an unexpected turn when she discovered the incredible story of Robert Smalls, a man who escaped slavery and went on to become a Civil War hero and U.S. congressman. She was so captivated by his story, she and her husband left Texas and moved to South Carolina, where she immersed herself in researching and writing what became her award-winning novel, Trouble the Water. Rebecca now calls Beaufort, South Carolina home. She continues to write and has volunteered at the Pat Conroy Literary Center and enjoys the beauty of the Low Country with her golden retriever, Bentley. She's also the author of the children's book, Stars of Wonder, and Loving the World with God. Through all her work, Rebecca remains committed to the power of storytelling because, as she believes, every story matters. And I have to tell you that when I first heard about Rebecca and her book, Trouble the Water, I immediately went and ordered it from her website, which I'll put in the show notes. And when you do that, you can ask for her to write something in the book. And I think I said something like, whatever feels on your heart at that moment. I didn't have anything specific. And when I got the book, I was so excited and I opened it and I read what she wrote to me. And it's absolutely beautiful. And I just want to share it here. To Christine, with gratitude for courageous stories and your important work of sharing them. All the best to you, Rebecca Bruff. And that thought about my work in podcasting just meant the world to me. So thank you for that, Rebecca, and thank you so much for being here.
It's a delight to be with you. This is a lovely introduction. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So here on the Wonder Boldly podcast, I hope that we inspire women who are wondering, thinking about something. Maybe they're thinking about their next adventure. Maybe they're thinking about starting a business. Maybe they're thinking about simply hitting pause and relaxing and taking time for themselves, which is so important. And I like to bring on guests who, for me, inspire me. And I think of my audience as an extension in my community. And I get so inspired by these stories that I hear. And your story, in my estimation, is absolutely amazing. So with that said, I'm so excited for you to share how you started your journey to be the author of the award-winning book, Trouble the Water.
Oh my goodness. I agree with you. It is a great story. It's not a story I could have orchestrated or anticipated. There was just so much sort of serendipity and good timing. I was very fortunate. So I'll try to make it sort of the brief version. In the spring of 2013, my late husband, Tom, and I, we were living in Texas. As you mentioned in the introduction, I'm a United Methodist pastor. I was working at a big church there. He was doing some consulting work. But his youngest, we had only been married about 10 months. So it was the second round for both of us, a great redemption of the belief in marriage. But that May, his youngest was graduating college at Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina. And so we planned to go to graduation. It was in mid-May. And at the very last minute, he suggested that we take just a couple of days and head south and visit the low country of South Carolina, which I'd never seen. We did graduation, we celebrated, and then we took a couple of days, and literally only 2 days we were in Beaufort. And because we had so little time, we jumped on one of the historic tours. And that's a small little town, but layers and layers of history. And the tour, the very first place it stopped was in front of the Tabernacle Baptist Church downtown, where there's this gorgeous bronze bust of a very distinguished looking gentleman. And the guide told us about a 2-minute version of the story of Robert Smalls, that he was born enslaved here in Beaufort in 1839, that he was sent to Charleston as a very young person, about 12 years old, where he was enslaved in several different capacities. But in 1861, when he was enslaved on a Confederate ship, he commandeered the boat and escaped and liberated himself and 15 other people. And then he came back to Beaufort and he bought the house that he was born behind, the master's house. He went on to local and then state and national leadership. He was a 5-term congressman. He was responsible for co-authoring some of the legislation that made public education a reality, not only in South Carolina, but in the United States. He was just a superhero, and I'd never heard the name. And my husband, who read all kinds of history, had never heard the name. And so we were intrigued. And when we finished the tour, I went to the bookstore and here in town and picked up a couple of things, and we flew back to Dallas. And I went back to work, and Tom went back to work. And for about 3 years, this story just stayed under my skin, and I read and I Googled and I tried to piece some of the missing pieces of the story together. I've never been a great historian, so I had a lot to learn. And in 2016, I said to Tom, I feel like this story needs to be told in a more accessible and full way. And I feel like I'm supposed to try to do that. And I had Googled how to write a novel. It's great. There are a lot of resources for anything. I hope your listeners know that whatever they are interested in, there are resources. When I went to college, right out of high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And so I took the route of least resistance and took placement tests, and I placed out of all the things I loved, like English and writing and literature. So I hadn't done any of that, but I did find some resources online. Anyway, I told Tom that I thought that I should try to do that. He was fully supportive. And we had revisited Beaufort a time or two in those intervening years because it's such a lovely place and we could see retirement on the horizon. So he said, yeah, you should try it. Go for it. Let's do that. And I said, if we do, it means spending some time I need to go to Beaufort for a few months and do some research. So he was on board. I had a conversation with the lead pastor at the church where I was serving, and he was great. He loves good history. He believes in following our callings. And we arranged for a 4-month sabbatical. The day after Christmas in 2016, we loaded up the dog and came to Beaufort and rented a house sight unseen. But we never went back. We fell in love with the place. I discovered that I couldn't write a story in 4 months. The research was going to take quite a lot longer. And it just opened up a whole new community and life for us that we hadn't anticipated. And so the sabbatical extended to a leave of absence and finally retirement. But it was, I think the sort of sweet spot was this combination of something that just wouldn't let me go. Howard Thurman writes about do the thing that lights you up. It just kept lighting me up. And so it was that, but it was also the support of Tom as a partner. It came at a time of some, not malignant, but some restlessness in me. I'd been doing what I'd been doing for quite some time. And I was feeling that sense of, I've described it to people as you have a great sweater, but at some point this just doesn't fit right anymore. It's got some holes and things in it. So it was just time to explore. And it was a risk. I'd not written like this. I'd done that little denominational book, Loving the World with God. But I knew I could write. I'd done it in the church in a different capacity. I knew the story mattered. I think that was what really drove me.
Why did you feel the story mattered? Like, what was it for you?
So I'm glad you asked that specifically. So the more I learned just in my own reading and trying to figure out some of the holes in the history, the deeper I dug into it, the more I realized I had not really learned American history. I went to a great high school. I went to a fabulous school for undergrad. One of our state senators taught history there, but it was decades later before I understood Texas' role in the American Civil War. Grad school, I didn't know American history. And I learned through the research that I didn't know American history because of what we're aware of. The dominating culture drives the narrative. And certainly in the South, that is the case. And it's not done with, it's just in the air almost. So as I was doing this research and I kept thinking, I'm this older privileged white woman. Who am I to tell the story? Who am I to tell this man's story? And then as I began to understand why the story had been silenced, and it was deliberately silenced, question changed to, who am I to not share the story? Now that I know the story, I know how much he contributed to not just this community or the state of South Carolina, but the entire nation in lots of ways. Who am I to withhold that? How could I not share the story? So that's where it became a real driving endeavor. I met a woman last night at a book event who grew up here, and she said, I never knew the story. I grew up right here. I never knew this man's story. A really fascinating experience happened to me. This was after the book came out, but it's another layer of how that happens. I was in Little Rock with a group of mostly clergy and their spouses, and the book was new. And I began by asking if anyone knew the man's story, because know it more locally than in other places. And this one woman raised her hand, African American, and she raised her hand. And I said, oh, are you from South Carolina? That's where people know the story. And she said, no, I grew up right here in Little Rock. And she said, I was in 7th grade when our schools were segregated, when our schools were integrated, segregated until then, but integrated when I was in 7th grade. And she said, before 7th grade, before integration, our teachers were telling us our stories. After integration, we didn't hear our stories anymore. And that really put the fine point on it for me, that there was deliberation about stories that are and are not highlighted.
Yeah, I have chills. Yeah.
Even back to your question, in the research, I learned that when Smalls died here in Beaufort in 1915, after this extraordinary, heroic life and career and service as a congressman, and he was the Ports Authority director, and he was responsible for bringing the railroad commerce back and involved in the acquisition of Paris Island. I mean, all sorts of things. When he died, the local paper didn't run an obituary. A white 1915.
Wow.
Deep South, the Black community. It was the biggest funeral in Beaufort, but the keepers of the story didn't share it.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah.
That says so much right there.
It says so much. It says so much. And I think about, as a pastor, just as an adult of a certain age, I know that happens in all kinds of institutions, in all kinds of families. There's pain, there's shame. There are lots of reasons that we don't like to tell all of our stories. And we, as we said earlier, we don't heal very well if we don't give attention to those things. It's not just history, it's the human condition.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you and your husband move, and it's a huge risk, right?
I hope this goes well. I waited tables in college. I guess I could do that again.
Exactly. And you have a very supportive husband at the time. He's now passed, and I want to honor him here and talk about him. And it was your second marriage, right?
Yes.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about Tom. And you're making this big move. He's a big supporter. Let's highlight him a little bit here.
Thanks. He used to quote, I think it's Oscar Wilde that said this, but he used to say that a second marriage is the triumph of hope over experience, which was absolutely true for us. My first marriage was long. It was a 25-year marriage. I have 2 incredible sons from that experience, but it was difficult. And Tom's had been not quite that long, 3 fabulous kids, also some challenges. And we'd both been single for quite some time when some mutual friends put us at the same table at a fundraiser in a church basement. And we really clicked. By that time, I liked independence. I wanted to share life, but I also really didn't want to share all of it. I'm an introvert. I like solitude. I like independence. He's wired the same way, but we really connected. We connected around a lot of things, around books and culture and travel. He loved to travel. He'd done a lot of international work. So we met, we clicked, we had a lunch date. We went out with the couple that introduced us. And then he took a job in Dubai.
Oh,
And
interesting.
yeah, yeah. And so for about a year and a half, our relationship was Skyping on what was my Saturday morning and his Saturday evening. And then when he came back to the Dallas area, we picked up. So by the time we decided to marry, which was it was so obvious, but it was also challenging because there'd been a lot of pain in both of our first marriages. But when we decided to do that, we realized we have one picture from our wedding because we had 5 grown kids in 4 different states. They were scattered. His brother and mother were in Baltimore. Most of my parents were in Dallas. There was no way we could get everyone together at the same time. And we knew that. We knew it was just not going to happen for a long time, if ever. So we got a marriage license and we told the kids we were going to use it before it expired, and called one of actually the friends who introduced us. She's a Methodist pastor and one of my dearest friends. So she officiated our wedding.
Oh.
Yeah. And the beauty of difficult early marriages is that you learn a lot. So we brought a lot of that. A lot of them was things I'll never say again were part of our lexicon. But it was a really wonderful partnership and connected on lots of things. And yet we were different enough to have our own things and spaces. When we came to Beaufort, I found this wonderful supportive writing community, and he found his tennis people and his bird people and his ocean conservation people. When COVID came along, we felt like we were the luckiest people in the world to like each other. We were stuck in the house, or a lot of outdoor time. It's a small town and a lot of outdoor space. So we were able to really enjoy the beauty of the place. We didn't get tired of each other. We were super fortunate. And then mid 2020, he began to go from being this robust, healthy, run all day, hike all day, play tennis all day person to some vague but serious medical issues, and had about 2.5 really difficult years. So I was sharing with a friend this morning, I feel like he didn't only support me in this. We both support each other in the things that matter to us, but he really gave me this experience. We wouldn't have visited Beaufort had he not suggested. I wouldn't have discovered the story. I think there are a lot of partners who would tap the brakes about moving across the country to find out if you can write. Everybody wants to write.
Which actually, that component wouldn't be that extraordinary, out of the ordinary, right? That's like most, right? If you look at that was, and that's why I love the story so much, like that was an incredible, amazing yes to say, we're going.
Huge. And to be fair, we knew that if it just didn't work, I could go back to Dallas and I would be working in a church. Like, we weren't going to be on the street, but it was a big dream. And we'd put it out there. We were telling people we were doing this thing that we'd never done, which is not like either of us, but we believed in it. We just believed in it. We believed in each other.
Yes, I love that. And which I have to say, in the book, you thank so many people, because it is, and we've talked about this community and it's collaboration. We don't do these things alone.
Oh my gosh, no.
And I'm not going to find it quickly here, but I'll just paraphrase. But in the book, when you're thanking the acknowledgments, and thank you to the friends who didn't say this is crazy and just waved goodbye, good luck, or something like that.
They didn't say it out loud. Some of them definitely scratched their heads, including my parents. My father was still living at the time, and I would call them every week or so after we came to Beaufort. And Mom and I would have a conversation, but he would get on the other line and kind of stalk for a minute. And then he would say, "Are you finished writing that book yet?" And I would say, "Dad, we've been here 4 weeks." Not yet. And he would say, "What the hell is taking so long?" And then on the other hand, a year and a half later, when we had a publisher and it was becoming a reality, he was so proud. He was so proud. When I would speak in Dallas, he would show up at all the things.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And just beam. So parental skepticism is a very healthy thing. We don't want our kids, even when they're 60, to do crazy things. But yeah, we felt lots of support. We felt lots of support as a couple and as part of a community. And I think we knew that even if this particular endeavor didn't work the way we wanted to, we would still have that support from those people because that's who they are.
Mm.
They were our people.
Ah, I love that note.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
And so during the writing, was he ill when you were writing?
Oh, no, the book was published in 2019 in June. So
Mhm.
we had about 6 months before COVID rolled around. And then it was that next summer, it was 2020 before he was ill.
Oh,
So
okay.
he was able to celebrate, to go to some of the
Yeah.
things. And we did a wonderful launch right here in Beaufort. We started at the Tabernacle Baptist Church where the bust of Smalls is. And then we went to the Conroy Center and he got to really celebrate all of that.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how has life been since Tom has passed for you?
Oh, Lord, a roller coaster. And it's still part of my writing. Part of that work on Substack is to ask that question a lot. How is life now? What does it look like moving forward? Vocationally, as a pastor, I've had some good training in the experience of grief and accompanying people in that. And before Tom's death, I lost my sister, I lost my dad, I lost some
Oh,
dear
sure.
friends. So it wasn't it wasn't the first experience of grief, but it was absolutely unique. He was my person.
Yeah.
And I've described it in various ways to people who also are in it in different ways. I don't really like to think about stages of grief because it's just not, it doesn't pay attention to the work
Mm.
about stages. But two things that I've learned, time is it's like an accordion. There are moments when it feels like our life together and his death were yesterday. And there are times when it feels like it was 2 decades ago. It just expands and collapses. There are times when I absolutely feel his presence with me and times when I beg for it. Both of those things are true. I've also learned, I am learning, is a better way to say it. It's not getting any easier, but it's becoming more familiar.
Okay. Thank you for that.
And by that, I thought after the first year, after the first anniversary of all the things and first anniversary of his death, I thought, okay, I made it through all that. I made it through his birthday and our wedding anniversary and so many memories. And I was wrong. The second year was harder. I thought that this third year would be easier. And it's not easier, it's different. I know how to brace myself for some things. I know when some moments are going to come up and then other things come out of the blue, but it's more familiar. It's like having a bruise that sort of doesn't go away. And every now and then you kick the coffee table and it still hurts. And you think, oh yeah, that's still there. So it's a way of being in life that I don't think goes away. And I think for me, I think for many people, I think it's opened me to the awareness that most people have some very deep wounds or losses that most of us don't know about. If I'm walking through an airport and I'm thinking about the travel that Tom and I did together, I'm hurting and I'm missing him, but nobody in the airport can see that. It's not on my t-shirt. It's not apparent, but now I know to see other people knowing that they have bruises and wounds and open gashes in their heart that we can't see. And so I try to give grace, knowing that not everyone's behavior is reflective of.
And you mentioned, thank you so much for sharing that. I wanted to honor Tom here and
Thank
hear,
you. That means the
hear
world
about
to me,
that.
Christine. Thank you.
I love that. And you mentioned writing on Substack. And so I wrote down what I wanted to share here with everybody, and you touched upon it. So I think maybe not all, but I think I've read a lot of your writing. So forgive me, I don't remember exactly where this came from, but you wrote this, and I think it was a recent one where you wrote, "When the ducks dive, the tears come." And I don't know why, or something like that, or where they're coming from. And do you remember writing that? And can you
Yes.
speak to that a little bit?
Yes. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. After we made Beaufort permanent, we found a home that it's an old home, but it's in this beautiful setting and it backs up to the intercoastal waterway. And so I'm able to watch a lot of birds. And Tom adored birds. He was a bird nut. He'd go hungry before he'd let the birds go hungry. So I'm learning to I watch birds a lot, and I feel like part of his sort of presence in the world is in the form of birds. But that particular phrase is echoes over and over with me when I see or experience something that just tears just show up. And then I find myself saying, what just happened? What was that about? And there are these ducks that I forget the name. Tom would be able to tell me what kind they are. I don't know right now, but they float along and then they just go under to find their fish or their little crab or whatever it is they're having for lunch. And I find myself like watching until they come back up. Please don't be gone. Please don't not come back.
Yeah.
And I think experiences like that evoke the sense of unknowing and the sense of mortality. And at some point, there's going to be a duck that dives and a medium-sized shark is down there, or a gator, or not everything pops back to the surface the way it was. That really poignant knowing of that there are no guarantees. I was going to say there are no guarantees. There is the guarantee. We're all mortal. All of creation is mortal. One of the promises that I made to Tom that I didn't have to say, but wanted to, is that I would feed his birds. And in the beginning, I felt like I was feeding his birds just despite everything. I'm going to die. They're going to die. Tom's gone, but damn it, I'm going to feed the birds. And then that has pivoted over the last 2.5 years to I'm going to feed the birds because we're all mortal and we do all share this life and this planet. And that's one of the things I can do to give a little bit and to honor the fact of life in the face of loss and death. But feed the birds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And you share stories.
Yes.
Right? And we all learn from stories. And
absolutely.
so do you see moving forward work in sharing more stories, maybe your own journey, your own stories?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'd like that. Part of my long journey, even before the move here and before Tom's illness, has been a journey of, I haven't shared this publicly very much, but I'm happy to. It's been a journey of revisiting and digging deeper into what I have thought that I understand and believe about the Christian faith, about what it means to follow Jesus or to live and love that way, what it means to long for that, and also really question institutional religion and the harm and the brokenness in institutions, and religion being one of those. And so I've been doing sort of some deconstruction, reconstruction of what that's like for me very personally, on a deeply personal level, and trying to learn how to articulate some of that. And when I share that with close friends, there's a lot of resonance with family and friends and other people in ministry. There's this deep love of the faith that some of us grew up with. It's given us these wonderful roots of hope and comfort and promise, but also some hard moments, disappointments, and some pain, and some. It's not been my personal experience, but there are branches on the family tree of faith traditions that are abusive or manipulative. And for myself, I feel like I had my blinders on to some of that for some time, and I want to go there.
Interesting. And to me, that sort of thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate that.
Thanks for asking the question.
And for me, that sort of resonates a little bit with how you articulated and how it landed for me about the hidden story of Robert Smalls.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's that work of peel the top layers back a little bit. When we ask what happened or why, ask it again and again. Then why did that happen? Then why did that happen? What's underneath that? It's like personal therapy. It's on a sort of a bigger stage, maybe, or from an institutional perspective. But I think it's really important work. And I think it helps us understand who we are personally, how we fit into the community that we call our community. I believe myself a part of this faith community, and yet I stand by the window looking both in and out sometimes to try to make more sense of it.
Yes. I love that analogy. That was perfect. Thank you for that. Yes. So Trouble the Water is an absolutely beautiful book. And I think one very interesting component of it that I didn't mention was that it's written from his perspective. Right? I loved that. And I understand that was a bit of a challenge.
I was rookie enough to start there without realizing immediately that it was a challenge. But it didn't take me very long to think through it. It was never lost on me. I'm this white, privileged, older woman in this time and place from West Texas in a new setting, putting words in the mouth of this young enslaved Black man. And so that meant all kinds of distances to bridge. But I really do love first person narrative. I think there's an immediacy to it. The writing came easy that way. And so even as I was questioning that, I stuck with it. And I played with some third person approaches a couple of times, but it didn't feel quite right. And I think part of it was a little bit arrogant. Part of it was I felt like he deserved to have his own voice in his own story, even though it was my voice telling him what his voice is, which is awful. And all the issues around representation and appropriation are really important, matter deeply. But then it came back to whose story is this, and who am I to tell the story, and who am I to withhold it? So I finally just dug in, and I thought one of the beauties of literature, one of the gifts of all kinds of stories, regardless of how they're told, they help us see another experience or into another person's life. It's not exactly walking in someone else's shoes, but it's walking alongside them. And I really wanted to walk alongside him and listen to his story and then try to tell it for him. So I stuck with first person. I had a super supportive agent who is just incredible. I met her here in Beaufort. She was Pat Conroy's agent. She's represented these amazing people, and she believed in the story. She was familiar with Robert Smalls and his story. And when she took it to some of the big publishers, they were skittish. Like, we've never heard of this author. She is telling this person's story in first person. That's a risk. But she found a smaller press that was excited about it. And they were willing to take the risk, and they made it work. But I love first person. I like reading first person. I like, in the book, there are some journal entries. I like reading personal accounts. I like reading epistolary things. It feels like looking over somebody's shoulder to see into their life. And so it felt important to see if it would work that way.
And I want to pull something out there because I think it really is important here on Wonder Boldly, and that is keeping with what feels right to you. And I talk a lot about this with women, whatever their journey, if they've become an author, whatever their journey is. Right. And we're often nudged to follow, I'm going to do air quote, the norms, or go a certain way. And some of us, including myself, have done that many times, to follow the standard or industry standard, whatever. And I always find that the best outcomes, in my experience, have been when we've held true to just, I know it doesn't sound right, industry standard or what it might be, but for me, that's how it feels, and that's how I'm going to proceed.
Yeah, the norms and the standards are there. It's like the rules of grammar because they're helpful. They make sense. And I think the adage is really true. You can break the rules, but know what they are and why you're doing it. And so I think sometimes when we follow our intuition, our heart, our longing, we might not really be able to find the words for it, but we know down deep, we know that what matters to us is worth whatever that risk is of coloring outside the lines a bit. And I also think that there's the gift of experience that I wouldn't have told my 13-year-old sons, know what the rules are, but break them if you feel okay about it. They didn't have the emotional toolbox and experience at that stage. But there are times that finally come to us when we know what we need. And I think it's perhaps more challenging for women. We are socialized, particularly women of my generation, we're socialized that everybody else comes first, or that we behave or say or look or make decisions in certain ways, that we conform in certain ways. And there's safety in that. There can be some wisdom in that. But there's also such deep value in listening to what's inside of us. And I was super fortunate to have that small handful of confidants that I could bounce things off of. And they might say, I don't see it. Or they might say, I don't see it, but I see that you see it. I want to support you. Or they might say, oh, why not? Why not? Go for it. And so I think trusting ourselves, trusting our own inner voice that comes from experience, not just from a wild idea, but from deep thought and experience and passion. And then testing that among people who know us or know the passion project and can give us input that may or may not be valuable. When I was writing this book, I didn't really understand the concept of beta readers. So I didn't ask a lot of people to read ahead. But I have friends now who have told me that sometimes they get so much feedback from really wise, good readers that they don't know which parts to embrace and which parts to reject. So I think being very discerning about who we bounce things off of is important, but it's good to have those people or a life coach or a professional coach, people that have enough knowledge of this path that we might be considering that they really can guide to some degree.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Rebecca.
That's been a delight. You're asking great questions. It's really fun.
Oh, thank you. And it's just been wonderful. One of the questions I'd like to ask is, what advice would you give to somebody else listening that's perhaps thinking about embarking on something exciting?
Part of what we just mentioned, of course, I think I would advise someone to spend a lot of time alone, take a long walk, listen to yourself first. Listen to yourself first. Measure the risk. I was very fortunate to take this particular route because I knew that there was a bit of a safety net. That's not always the case. But I think that the desires and passions of our hearts put there for a reason. I don't think they just come out of nowhere. They have been maybe in incubation for a long time. And so I would really encourage people to honor that inclination. That may or may not mean following through, or it may or may not mean following through in the way that they originally see, but honor the inclination, honor the curiosity, honor the passion, honor the possibilities, and imagine the dream. What would it look like if you got there? And is that the thing you want to strive for? It might be.
It might be. Exactly.
Might be. Yeah. So, wonder boldly. I was telling you, please wonder boldly.
Thank you. Wonder boldly. Absolutely. Yeah. I want to thank you so much. And I also want to take a moment and just thank Tom, because like you said, it wouldn't really be in existence if it wasn't for Tom.
Thank you so much for honoring him that way. That's huge.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I cannot wait to share this with my community. They're going to love it.
It's been a delight talking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you liked it, it would mean the world to me if you'd give it a 5-star review and recommend it to a friend. I so appreciate you listening, and I hope that these episodes motivate you and inspire you to go after your dreams. Until next time, continue to wonder boldly.